Chapter 6, Echoes of Power. The silence that followed the shattering of the crystal was heavy and profound. Ava stood there, her heart still pounding as shards of the once glowing crystal lay scattered across the stone pedestal. The light that had once filled the cavern was gone, leaving only a dim, eerie glow from the symbols on the walls. Ethan stepped closer, his eyes wide as he surveyed the fragments of the crystal, now nothing more than lifeless shards. "It's done," Ava whispered, her voice trembling. She looked at Ethan, searching his face for reassurance. But his expression was guarded, his eyes flicking from the shattered crystal to her face. "It's done," he echoed, though his voice held none of the certainty she had hoped for. "But this is only the beginning, Ava." Destroying the crystal was just the first step. There are consequences for everything, and we've just set something in motion that we might not fully understand. Ava's gaze dropped to the shards at her feet, the sense of unease growing within her. She felt a deep, instinctual fear that she had just unleashed something far more dangerous than she could comprehend. She clenched her fists, trying to steady herself. What happens now? Ethan took a deep breath, his eyes meeting hers. "Now we leave. We have to get back to Willow Creek and figure out what we do next. We can't stay here. It's not safe." He glanced around the cavern, his expression tense. "We have to get out of here before—" A low rumble interrupted him, the ground beneath their feet trembling. Ava's eyes widened in alarm as the walls of the cavern began to shake, dust and small rocks falling from the ceiling. "Ethan," she said, her voice rising with panic. "Run!" Ethan grabbed her arm, pulling her away from the pedestal and toward the far side of the cavern. Ava stumbled, her heart racing as the rumbling grew louder, the walls seeming to close in around them. She followed Ethan, her eyes darting around for any sign of an exit. They ran through the cavern, the symbols on the walls glowing brighter as the tremors intensified. Ava could feel her pulse pounding in her ears, her breath coming in short gasps. The fear was overwhelming, but she forced herself to keep moving, her eyes fixed on Ethan's back as he led the way. Suddenly, a beam of light appeared ahead of them, a narrow opening in the cavern wall, just big enough for them to squeeze through. Ethan reached it first, glancing back at Ava. "Go!" he shouted, gesturing for her to climb through. Ava didn't hesitate. She dropped to her knees, crawling through the narrow gap, her hands scraping against the rough stone. She could feel the ground shaking beneath her, the sound of the cavern collapsing behind her. She pushed herself through the opening, gasping as she emerged into the forest beyond. Ethan followed close behind, and they both scrambled away from the cavern entrance, just as the ground gave one final violent shudder. The entrance collapsed, the stones falling in a chaotic heap, sealing whatever lay beyond it away from the world above. Ava collapsed onto the forest floor, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. Ethan knelt beside her, his face pale, his eyes fixed on the now sealed entrance. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, the silence of the forest settling around them. Finally, Ava turned to Ethan, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did we do the right thing?" Ethan looked at her, his expression softening. He reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We did what we had to do, Ava. Whatever that crystal was, it was too powerful, too dangerous. Your grandmother knew that, and now we know it too. We made the right choice. Ava nodded, though the doubt still lingered in her heart. She looked up at the sky, the sun shining down through the trees, the world above seeming so different from the darkness they had just escaped. "What now?" she asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. Ethan sighed, standing up and offering his hand to her. "Now we go back to Willow Creek. We need to figure out what comes next. There are still too many questions about the crystal, about what it meant to your grandmother, and about why you and I are involved in this." Ava took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet. She looked at him, the determination in his eyes giving her a sense of comfort. Despite the fear and uncertainty, she knew she wasn't alone. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. They began to make their way back through the forest, the silence between them filled with unspoken thoughts. The trees seemed to close in around them, the shadows growing deeper as they moved further from the collapsed cavern. Ava couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. "Do you think it's over?" Ava asked, her voice barely audible. Ethan glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. "I don't know. I think we've just started to uncover the truth. Whatever that crystal was, it wasn't just a source of power. It was a part of something much bigger. Something that your grandmother tried to keep hidden." Ava shivered, her mind racing with questions. She thought of her grandmother, the secrets she had kept, the fear she must have felt. Ava had always known there were things her grandmother had never spoken of, but she had never imagined anything like this. As they reached the edge of the forest, the sight of Willow Creek brought a sense of relief. The town looked peaceful, the sun shining down on the cobblestone streets, the shops and houses bathed in warm light. It was hard to believe that just a short distance away, they had faced something so dark and dangerous. Ethan paused, his gaze fixed on the town ahead. "Ava, I need you to promise me something," he said, his voice serious. Ava looked at him, her brow furrowing. "What is it?" "No matter what happens next, we have to stick together. Whatever we've unleashed, whatever comes next, we can't face it alone. Your grandmother tried to protect you, and now it's up to us to protect each other." Ava nodded, a sense of determination filling her. "I promise, Ethan, we'll face it together." Ethan gave her a small smile, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Good, because I have a feeling that this is far from over." They walked into Willow Creek, the town seemingly untouched by the events that had just transpired. But Ava knew that beneath the surface, the truth was waiting to be uncovered. The secrets of her grandmother, the power they had destroyed, and the echoes of what they had set in motion. As they made their way down the familiar streets, Ava couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, that the world around them was different now. The weight of the key, the crystal, and the cavern still hung heavy in her mind, and she knew that whatever lay ahead, it would test them in ways they had never imagined. But as she walked beside Ethan, she felt a sense of purpose, a determination to see this through to the end. Together, they would face whatever came next, and they would uncover the truth, no matter how dark or dangerous it might be. End of Chapter 6. Chapter 6 finds Ava and Ethan escaping the collapsing cavern and reflecting on the significance of their actions. They return to Willow Creek, knowing that the journey is far from over and that the mystery they are entangled in runs deeper than they ever imagined. Stay tuned for the next episode. Sayonara.